welcome back to Her Story. And this season, I am having the best time interviewing some great pastors' wives, some great friends, women that I respect and love. And so today I had to bring back Dr. Sheila Bailey again because we got to have part two. We got to have part two. So this is part two, y'all, of our conversation. And listen, Dr. Bailey, you are such a woman of grace, such a woman of wisdom. Listen, preaches and teaches across this country. And just thank you so much for your ministry. But the one thing that when you say you're a member of Concord Church, and people will say, oh, Pastor Carter, but then they'll say Dr. E.K. Bailey, our founding pastor, your husband, the visionary, and they'll speak towards just that he was ahead of his time. And can you speak to that? Can you talk to us about what ministry was like under his leadership?
I'll be delighted to do so. Thank you again for allowing me to come back for part two. We had just a grand time the last time. It was a lot of fun. And I just admire you so very much for you are a woman of vision as well as your husband being a man of vision. And we're just delighted that both of you are giving leadership to our church. And so God just bless you and you're lots of fun too.
Look, we have to keep it fun.
Yeah, we have to keep it fun. E.K. Bailey was definitely a man of vision, and he shared that before the founding of the Concord Church, that he would say that God had placed in him a vision from the Lord that could be supported by Scripture, that there would be a full-time staff that could plan, organize, supervise, work with the people to carry out the biblical mandates of evangelism and discipleship, stewardship within the church. As we say now, we grow people.
Yes.
When the church was founded, many churches basically had, as far as staff positions, there was the pastor, the secretary, the custodian, the musician, maybe one or two musicians,
Okay.
And if I did not say custodian, the custodian as well. However, Pastor Bailey envisioned that there would be other persons on staff. And one of the first persons, I'm honored that they would ask me to be the director of Christian education. And they came from the membership. It really started with the deacons, that they went to my husband and said, the Lord has blessed us with a larger building because we had come from another church that didn't have all the space that we had at 3410 South Polk Street. And so, Pastor Bailey, didn't you say that your wife had a degree in Christian education? Said yes. And would you be willing if she could be our first staff person in addition to the staff people that we already have? And he said, well, let's ask her. That would be her decision. And I was so excited because that was my major in school. Then after that, we were able to include the director of evangelism, and there were other positions that were added. But during that time, it was the director of Christian education. My role was to organize the teaching ministry of the church and to listen to pastor as he gave the vision, and under the umbrella of Christian education, how do we implement that vision? So that there was a teaching ministry, an evangelism ministry, there was mission, there was ministry for adults, children, and youth. And each one of those would have a pastor or a director eventually.
Okay.
My role, first of all, was training teachers, because in the 60s and early 70s, usually it was the Sunday school, and we still value Sunday school classes. But the teachers' meeting back in the day, you would have a teachers' quarterly. The teachers would meet once a week, and it would be, have you read your quarterly? Yes. And a summary would be given, but no instruction on how to teach the students, whether they were children, youth, or adults. And I was just thrilled to have the opportunity to teach the book, Jesus the Master Teacher.
Okay.
So, and that book is still a classic book. It's out of print, but I still keep it in my library. That we don't have to model from the public school teachers as much as we admire professional teachers. Look to see how Jesus actually taught. And it was a 6-week course. And if you were going to teach at the Concord Church, you were going to have to go through that class and you would be certified. Well, we set the bar high. And even if you may have been a public school teacher or private school teacher, you still had to be taught how Jesus taught. We had a certification program, and then there was a certification ceremony. So people would come and say, can I become a teacher? I have not graduated from college. It doesn't matter. As long as you meet the requirements and you do what has been assigned. And there were lessons, there were lesson plans, there was practice teaching. Michelle Briscoe, who we honor so very, very much with all of her work with Bible Study Fellowship and teaching throughout the country. She was one of the students that was right there in BSF. And there was another lady, she's with the Lord now, Vera Reed. Vera Reed said, I have not had the training, but she worked harder than most of the people who had been trained because she wanted to meet that standard. And I said, how did you learn those scriptures? She said, I put them on an index card and would tape them wherever I would go. So if I was stuck in traffic, I would know them. If there were certain principles I had to learn. And so teaching was elevated. The value of teaching was elevated. So that was a teaching ministry. Then I also worked with all of the leaders there at the church. So if you were going to be over a particular organization, then we had leadership meetings. And you had to do goals, objectives, timelines, strategic planning. And I didn't do all of it, but then I found other people, Maurice Amler, Cynthia Nunn, Aquila Allen, that knew how to do this, and we would have leadership retreats for them. So that was back in the 70s when we were doing that as well. Later, we were able to expand and then hire a director of a women's ministry. But the director of women's ministry reported to the director of Christian education. So it was a training process that Pastor Bailey would say all programs will come through the director of Christian education office.
Now, y'all see, this is why I told you Pastor Bailey was ahead of his time. I mean, this is in the 60s.
Yes.
And look, no, sorry, the 60s and 70s.
Right, because the church was founded, 60s was when...
Late 60s.
Late 60s. We were organized in 75.
Right, so, yes. So, yes, that's why he's ahead of his time. Just the structure and the strategic, we just came off a staff retreat. And so we were all looking at our strength finders and what we have. And so I guarantee if they had strength finders when Pastor Bailey was living, and he did his strength finders right now, he would be a maximizer. He would definitely be strategic.
Yeah.
But I look at that because it's so important that you have that structure and you have that vision and you see that, our church is celebrating 50 years next year.
Yes, praise God.
And if it wasn't for that structure and if it wasn't for that strategic planning and of course the prayer and the vision, I don't know where our church would be. And so on. And then those names that you named, there's people who are going to be listening to me like, now who is that? And I can tell y'all the names that she named are pillars, not only in our church, but in the city of Dallas.
That's right.
For just not only their leadership, but then also their integrity and just their heart for God and people.
Yes.
Yeah. I look at those years and I know they had been met with challenges. What were some of the challenges that you faced? Because now you're working for the church. So now you're having to balance your home, church, and like for our house, we have a rule that we do not bring Concord home, but sometimes it does come home,
Oh, yeah.
and we have to be like, "No, now why did you do that? I don't like that."
Uh-huh.
And then he'll be like, "No, I did not like what you said in that meeting. That was just too much."
Uh-huh.
That's usually what he says to me. So how did you balance that?
I definitely had challenges. There are great rewards, but just being real with the challenges. Time management was a biggie. That I wanted my personal time with the Lord for devotion, my time with my husband, my time with each one of our children. And then when I got pregnant the third time, I was confined to bed rest for 7 months. So at that time, of course, I wasn't working at the church. So I worked full-time as a Christian education director, although paid part-time, and we know how that was, and I was appreciative of the privilege. But we were growing as far as salary, compensation was concerned as well. So I was there for about 7 years. And then my husband would say, now I need for you to go home. And Christian education will continue. And that is right. It continued because when he started having different conferences, then I was a part of teaching of the conferences either at the church or having the Ministers' Wives class at my home. Matter of fact, I was in D.C. speaking this past Sunday, and a lady came to me and said, we haven't seen each other in years. I was at one of your first classes there in your home. So that was just a blessing too. But the whole matter of how do we schedule, how do we plan, only the grace of God saw us through that, because my husband was a very spontaneous person, and he could have very easily said, oh, I want you to come and have dinner with us today, and I wouldn't know anything about it. On the way home, I've just invited such and such person to come and have dinner with us.
This is before cell phones.
Yeah, before cell phones, and you didn't
and
have
DoorDash.
Yeah, or we didn't even all of that. Or the pastor calling the pastor's aide at the last minute, saying, "Can you help me out with this?" Or I remember the time when he was preaching a citywide revival in Cleveland, Ohio. And this young man said, I'm coming to Bishop College. And my husband, now if you need anything, just come and see me. And the young man came, and he was our house guest for a while. One of the several, who had stayed with us at different times. So we had to have all kinds of meetings. Sometimes they were come to Jesus meeting. How can I do this? He was such a people person that the Bishop College preachers, a group of them would come over to our house every Sunday after church, and that was during the time that churches had 3 o'clock services almost every Sunday. And we would eat together, we became family, but then I had the first baby, and I said, baby, I just can't do this. I can't be at Sunday school at 9. 11 o'clock service, come home, feed you and a group of other people, be at 3 o'clock service, be at 6 o'clock service, BTU, stay for 7 o'clock service, and be at my job before I was working at the church at 9 o'clock on Monday morning. I just can't do all that. And he was like, you can't? No.
Listen, I'm not your superwoman.
No, that's exactly it. I just can't do all that. So we had to talk about what could I do. And he had to have the talk with his buddies that, we got a baby now. Sheila just can't do it all. We still want you to come over, but we're going to have to plan what that's going to look like and when you're going to come. Then as the children started getting older and babysitters and all of that, and an older woman helped me one Sunday. She said, I know you and Pastor Bailey really love each other. And he preaches series on family and what you need to do, but we don't ever see you two riding in the same car together. And I looked at her like, and so what are you saying? She said, it's important for the public to see the closeness that he preaches about. I said, but I have children and I have to get them ready for school the next day. He's going to stay here and talk to the people. I need to take them home, make sure they get their baths and ready for the school week.
Yeah.
And said, but can you think of a way that once a month you can ride with him? And I needed that wisdom. And so that meant plan ahead, get a babysitter, and there's Mrs. Merciel Jones, who lived just a few doors up from the church on Polk Street, and she said, oh yeah, we'll take care of those girls, and they'll give them their baths and one thing after another. Then not only was it a public display of our closeness, it gave us a date night out.
Yeah.
You know, so we would go out somewhere, even if it was bacon and eggs or a hamburger, whatever it might have been. So we had to work a plan there. There wasn't much that was available that you could just say, we're going to go to this book or we're going to go to this conference. You didn't have many conferences that we were exposed to. The Lord led him to create conferences and to go to some conferences later. But we had to talk about it. Now, another challenge was working with my husband. See, it's one thing just to be the pastor's wife and the pastor's bringing it home, but when the pastor and pastor's wife are both on staff, I applaud what you and pastor are doing because I know what it was like, you know, for us. It looks easy when the people see you, but we had to set boundaries. In the word of Dr. Wanda Taylor Smith, we had to set boundaries. We had to say, do you want me to respond? Are you talking to your wife or are you talking to the director of Christian education? Because if you are saying your dream, your vision to the director of Christian education, my reply is, when are you going to plan on implementing this? What are the stages? What are the goals and objectives? When are we going to announce it to the staff? What's the plan of action? And he would look at me sometimes and say, I just wanted you to say it was a good idea. I said, so tell me which one you're talking to.
Which hat do you want me to wear tonight?
That's it. That's it. You know, because if we're at a beach in Acapulco on a vacation,
I don't want to talk about
I don't want to talk about it at all right now. I thought we were on vacation. One of these kind of things. So we had to just be real with each other and say, now is the time we can talk about it. Or I just want my wife to tell me what you think. Baby, that's a great idea. Go for it.
Yes.
But if you're talking about the director of Christian education, I'm going to talk about the planning process.
Yes.
Okay. And then he would say the same thing. He would tell me after preaching a revival, Sheila, give me 3 days. It was almost like we know Jesus was resurrected on the third day. I'll be resurrected on the third day, baby.
Don't ask me about trash or don't tell me about the teacher or what you need. Just give me some good love.
Yeah, look, that's it.
How my man is, he's like, all right, give me some, and then don't talk to me for a minute. Yes. Yes. If you're not a pastor's wife, you'll catch that later. Yeah. They need some good. Yeah. All right.
And you may have to wait for some of that after day one.
Yeah, Lord, because they come in, they be like, oh,
I'm tired.
Then it's like, excuse me. Oh, wait a minute.
Yes, I thought you were so tired.
They're never tired.
No.
Oh goodness, I'm like, I can't believe you talk about this one. But anyway,
okay,
they need to know.
Yeah.
So, but I love the boundaries and so on, because I think sometimes, as I know for myself, I'll have a million questions, and so my husband will tell me, like, now listen, I do not feel like being interviewed, so I need you to put your little interview hat down, and I just need you to be. And I was like, okay, yes. So just being present in those boundaries are so huge and make a huge difference and cut down on. I know when I see his laptop come out, anytime we go on vacation, when I see his laptop come out, that's when I know vacation is over. Yeah. And so I let him process and let him go back into his mode and so on.
I'm happy that both of you had the sabbatical. During EK's time, you didn't hear pastors taking a sabbatical.
No.
It was a vacation, and many times it was a work vacation.
Yes, I was about to say a work vacation.
Yeah. And there were some pastors before our generation, the vacation was at the convention. And you would hear at the National Baptist Convention, because they look forward to seeing their friends, and of course they would have good preaching and fellowshipping and all that, but it wasn't the same as a vacation in the sense of going to a beach or a city or a quiet place. But he would just say, we just need to get away for that. I remember one year, it was before the Learning Center opened. We went to Acapulco. We had never been there before. His godmother, whom both of us loved so very much, had just died. So we were on a grief journey, but we still went after the service. It was so hot there. We weren't able to see much of this beautiful city during the daytime. We would go out at night. But during the daytime, he was on that phone talking to the church most of the time. And then in the evening, he said, oh, I got this done and I got that done, and we're ready to open the Learning Center. And I'm thinking, great for Concord, but how about us?
Yeah.
And how about you for self-care?
Yeah.
But Sheila, I'll be good this evening. We'll go. So to have a vacation and only have quality time for a few hours was disappointing. So when he comes back to the church, he's telling the church, Sheila and I had a wonderful time in Acapulco.
You're sitting there like,
Yeah, with that face.
like, well.
Yes, you say so. But the pastor's wife's face. But it only takes one person who knows how to really be transparent. A neighbor called us, Sheila, and he hadn't been a member of Concord a long time. He said, Sheila, that wasn't a vacation. That was a sabbatical. That was a work vacation that he had. Let me speak to him. He owes you a vacation. Yes.
Thank you, Lord, for sending those people in our husbands' lives who
Yes.
tell them, like, you're doing too much.
You're doing too much.
My favorite is, I think it was Bishop Omer. We were telling him, it was like after the preaching conference, and we were like, oh, we're getting ready to take the family to Disneyland. And he was like, oh, that's nice. So what are you and Brian going to do afterwards? And I was like, oh, that's it. He was like, no, you need a vacation after the vacation. Y'all need to go away by yourselves.
Yeah.
And I was like, please speak to him about that. And tell him. So I'm thankful for those voices that tell them, like, no, this is what, you should do this or you should do that, and so on.
Trying to achieve balance can be very, very difficult, but it can be done, but we have to be intentional and consistent in doing it, and it takes both parties to be able to communicate with it.
Yeah. I think when I look at a pastor in the 70s and 80s and even the 90s, I think it's just now in 2024 that pastors are starting to take breaks.
Okay.
Or even thinking about taking a break. A sabbatical is still very new in the African American culture. I remember our first sabbatical we took. People thought something was wrong with us. They were like, are y'all coming back? Are y'all getting ready to leave? Is something wrong with your marriage? Are one of y'all sick? And we're like, no, we're just taking a break and we'll be back. But I think you couldn't take a break then. I think just how the world was and just how the culture was. Even though you needed to take a break, it just was unheard of. That's just what they did. They just preached all day, like you said. I hope y'all keyed in on that schedule on Sunday. And it's not like when I was thinking that schedule, I was talking to somebody else, and they were a PK. They grew up as a PK, and they still are in wonder of how their mother would have something hot for Sunday dinner, on top of getting us ready, on top of being at church and being on point, then coming home, having dinner, and then going back and then having something for us to eat when we came home. So I think just that season of life in the 70s and 80s, I know in 2024, oh no, I couldn't have made it. He would have been so disappointed. He was like, so we're just going to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Yeah. And a glass of milk.
It's amazing how planning had to be a part of it. It was, you knew you were going to the grocery store. It was meal planning. It was, okay, I'm going to have fun with the kids on Saturday. Sometimes it was the soccer practice with Iman, the girls doing different activities. But I don't know if I had a crock pot or not, but you had to have that roast ready, or it was putting it in the oven on real low temperatures and letting it cook and getting up during the middle of the night and taking it out.
All that looking. Listen, I'd be sleeping through like, oh wait, hold on. That meat would have burned. It'd been tough, rough.
Laying out the clothes ahead of time. Back then we were wearing stockings, being there at the store on Saturday, joining all the other women who waited until the last minute.
Having an extra pair.
Yes, all of that, having your clothes laid out, your hair done. It took planning. It was a part of the culture. It really was a part of the culture. And that's the reason I value pastors' wives so much. As pastors' wives, you are the MVP, I believe the most valuable player, because so many times the membership nor the public knows all that you do, the time that you spend in prayer, the time that you know all of his sides, the good, bad, and the ugly. He knows your good, bad, and ugly too. But you're communicating, and you want him to go out to be the best that he can be. You're praying for him, for his character, for him to have a hedge of protection around about him, for his direction, for his communication, for his counseling, playing the relationship that he has with you, with the children, with the neighbors, with those who are coming into the church. And then if you're planning a church, because Concord was, we say now, plant. It was only 200 plus people. And so you have this great vision that the Lord has given you, and you have this energy, but you have to work and work and work. So both of us were spending more time at the church than we had planned to, because we didn't want the people to do it all by themselves. We wanted to show we're in this together and we're working together. And then there's time to just, people have needs. People would go to the hospital, people die, people are hurting, that you are reaching out to people. And you didn't have much resources either. You didn't have the money and all this, so you're trying to raise money. You know, you're preaching, teaching, and giving.
Preaching, teaching, giving, and then you're also traveling. You add travel to that because you're doing revivals to, or just doing other preaching opportunities or other teaching opportunities to, I'm trying to think of the word, but just to help with everything else that you're out giving.
You're right.
And outpouring.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of that money would come back so that you could give. Because EK, and I know as the Carters as well, you all are very generous in giving. I'm a recipient of your generosity. EK believed in giving, and he would say, if you are the pastor, you're going to need to lead in giving, until he had some CEOs that joined Concord. They were making so much money. He said, well, I can't do more than they can, but I can do the best that I can give. And then you would go to these other church services, and you need to lead in giving too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that may not have been in the budget. So, okay. Oh, $50. Oh, and then somebody would say, we need for a brother $100. What? Oh, okay. Now the Lord blesses you, but just talking about this all affects the budget, and how you have to come back and put it into the budget, and how are we going to manage it?
Yes. You were a church plant before there were church plants officially, and I think people don't realize just the work that goes into it. But thank you so much for just how you described all that, because you, as a pastor's wife, would you say that is your heart right now? For a pastor's wife, like in this season that you're in right now, what is your passion right now?
Pastors' wives and widows. It was, I can't remember the year, we were still at 3410 South Polk Street at Concord. I went to the National Baptist Convention to speak. They were going to organize a auxiliary call, Baptist ministers' wives and widows. EK wasn't able to make it that year. I called him after that evening. I said, guess what? They just elected me to be president. And he said, oh, the National Baptist Ministers' Wives and Widows, how you get that? I said, only God did it. I don't have a clue. There were mentors such as Mrs. Billy Jo Chu from Fort Worth, the president's wife of the convention, Mrs. Leslie Jones from Shreveport. And there were other women that just rallied around me to teach. I wasn't qualified. I didn't have the experience that they had, but the Lord allowed that to happen for me to do that. And before I was in that position, I just had a heart for pastors' wives with the teaching, because as the director of Christian education, I was more administrator.
Okay.
But with we also had an organization of ministers' wives at Concord, and for one time we had 50 women that were in there. So it was important that the women would know, what does the call of ministry mean? If your husband was called today, how would you be able to handle that? What would principles and precepts would you take into a church? What are the practical steps? Concord would wear pants. If your husband's called to a church, is it feasible and wise for you to wear pants into that new church? Not unless you know that. Yep, not unless you know that culture. So, I still have a heart for pastors' wives, and then that went into the ICG, the Institute of Church Growth, of having those women into the home, and we would teach on certain subjects. There was a book entitled I'm Sick and Tired of Being a Pastor's Wife by Shirley Wise. And when that book was published, I think every pastor's wife ran and got it, because she was bold enough to say things that nobody else would ever say. And so we taught that, and then we set up groups as a project with ministers' wives. Let's entitle it Prescriptions for Being Sick and Tired of Being a Pastor's Wife. And so the ladies actually did a project, and we worked on that. By that time, then the Lord allowed me to start teaching other places. And so then it's like passing the baton to someone else. Like Cynthia Armstrong became the teacher of that class. And there were other ladies that also, started teaching that particular class. So now that I am a pastor's widow, I am still a member of the Metropolitan Baptist Ministers' Wives and Widows Union. That Sister Carlette Johnson is our president. Now I have more time to give on the local level of women that I was busy at Concord teaching and doing one thing after another. I can go to their meetings, I can fellowship with them. And pastors' widows, it's amazing how God is allowing me to connect. Some of my best friends are widows of pastors. I may have known them and we've seen each other at different functions, and then their husband dies. And I will either call them or someone will say, why don't you give her a call? And just being a sister, hey, I'm here for you. I am praying for you. Anything I can do. And one lady will be going on the trip to Alaska with us.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and we traveled before, but we really became close after she became a pastor's widow. There are a few other ladies that we have a special relationship with because of being a pastor's widow. Just because we don't have the title doesn't mean that we're insignificant. We are still women. God still has a plan for us. He still has work to be done. And it isn't the title, it is being a servant and doing work for Him.
Yes. When I look at your life and I look at just the different seasons that you've had, wife, mother, educator, administrator, pastor's wife, one thing I see when I hear your story is just community. I hear just that it's never you by yourself, it's community, whether it's through parenting, whether it's through as a widow, but no matter what season that you're in, the lesson that I learned from hearing your story is you have to have community. You have to have community. You have to have a prayer life. You have to be an advocate for your children. You have to be an advocate and a cheerleader for your husband as well. I think sometimes we feel like we have to do it alone. And what you show us is that, no. I love how you said that I saw this woman and I knew her, and then she's in the season now that she's a widow, and I'm like, no, come, like I'm reaching out to her. And I feel like that's what we have to do in this journey as women, is just making sure that we don't leave anyone behind, but then we also are working together in this community. I love that y'all are about to travel. I heard Alaska is like one of the best vacations.
I'm looking forward to it so much. I don't know what to do, Before I come back to Alaska, you are so right. It's about community, because when I became a pastor's wife at 22, I've shared with you, and you've been kind enough to share with others, how Mom Jackson, who was a pastor's wife for over 60 years at the St. John Church there in Oklahoma City, my husband's godparents, how she told me, love God, love your husband, love your children, love the community, love the people. And it's taken all of my life and continual. I'll never accomplish all of that, because as long as God gives me breath, I will be doing all that, except I will be loving the legacy of E.K. Bailey, but loving all other parts. It took community to teach me. It took the women like a Mrs. C.B.T. Smith, a Mrs. Chiquita Wright, and the names are so long, who are pastors' wives, but also a Mrs. A.W. Blair, who wasn't a pastor's wife, but was a stalwart leader in the church, and Mrs. Minnie H. Page, and a Sister Vera Reed, and Sister Dixie Dutcher. The list is long, long, long. That they put their arms around me and they talked to me as if I was their daughter. They gave me the advice, the knowledge, the wisdom, the encouragement, the empowerment, the opportunities, and then told me about what church culture was like. We don't hear this word much now, protocol, when it comes to church. That they talked about church protocol. I remember the first church that my husband pastored, 3 o'clock service. I came there and I sat down. And I didn't know that when the guest pastor's wife comes in, who's going to be preaching at 3 o'clock, as a hostess, I should have gone to her and said, would you please sit with me? I just didn't know that. I wasn't trying to be uppity, just ignorant, and ignorant is not bliss. And it took a Mrs. Minnie H. Page to just come over to me sweetly. Would you like for me to get her and bring her to you? Yes, that would be very nice.
And your head would be like, well, no. But I mean, she's over there. I'm over here. I didn't know. Oh.
She's comfortable. And so after that, I said, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. All right, so then the next 3 o'clock service, which was the next Sunday,
yeah.
Then I started noticing when I would go places, people, the experienced pastors' wives, they would say, oh, bring Mrs. Bailey here. Oh, okay. How I received invitations to speak was because the women opened the doors. Mrs. A.W. Blair was a leader in the North Texas District Association that the church belonged to. And she said, oh, our pastor's wife could do that. And then she came back to me, she said, and I have you on the district program in order to bring greetings, the occasion, teach a class, whatever it was. So it's because of the community.
Yes.
That they helped me. Now, I understand ministers' wives that we're caught in a dilemma at times. I'm going to talk girl to girl. Sometimes we don't want to trust because we've been burned. And we trusted people, we've taken people to heart, and the people have hurt us. And so it's like, no, I can do this by myself. You know. And Anne Graham Lotz has the best book to me on Wounded by God's People.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And all of us have some kind of wounds, but if we're not healed from those wounds, we can become angry, we can become bitter, we can be disconnected from the church. We'll miss the blessings of community.
Yes.
Or we'll get the blessings of an outside community and miss the blessings of the church community that's there. So I am thankful for the community within Concord. I am thankful for the community outside of Concord. And whatever hurts that I may have had, the rewards have been far more than the problems I've ever had.
All right.
And matter of fact, some of the challenges and problems that I've had is because of the community having my back. I didn't have to scar my hands. I didn't have to say certain things because some people fought the battles for me because God had them to fight them for me.
Yes, I love that, and that is so true. I think in my 20s, I was a fighter.
Oh,
I was.
always
I
have
mean,
different personalities. We
yeah, look,
understand.
I wasn't like physical fight, but if I would debate you down or this that, and I think the one thing I've learned as I've gotten older and just through prayer or just through just different situations, you have to own what you did.
Yes,
You have to own your part in it.
that's right.
But then also you can learn from it. But then you can also just say, you know what? I should not have handled it like that. And I'm sorry. I recently had a conversation with someone and we were friends. Would talk and so on. A situation happened. She thought I had a role in it. I thought she didn't like me because of something, and had that conversation, and I felt like in my head I was like, God, I'm thankful for this conversation, but then I'm like, wasted so much time. And if we had had that conversation, could have seen each other through just different things, because you miss that friendship, or you miss that. So I think it is so important that you walk through whatever wound that you've been wounded. And then there's some wounds that you're like, oh, my dead black body, am I talking to that fool again? But I can say that, but then I can forgive them, but I can also be like, no, if I see you publicly, I will speak to you. But but I'm not gonna be. I can't get down with you no more.
And I can understand that too. You know, the forgiveness we must do, the reconciliation. The forgiveness can be a process. The reconciliation can be a process. But whether that means that person's going to be as close to you again,
right?
You know, only the Lord can lead you on that. May say,
right.
I've forgiven you, but we may have to grow to that, or we just agree to disagree that we will not have that kind of relationship again. But I wish you well.
I wish you well, friend. It's good to see you, girl.
You know, when you've asked me, what do I do when I have challenges and all? Pray, and that prayer may change. Like, what, Lord? Do you know what happened? You know, help, Lord. Wisdom, Lord, patience, Lord, all kinds of prayers, depending upon what I'm dealing with right now. But then I would have to look at what's the real issue? Because sometimes what a person is saying is not the problem. It could be their insecurity, it could be their jealousy, and as a pastor's wife, they could have a problem with my husband.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and because they don't like him, they transferred it to me. They don't like me, and they don't like my kids either.
Yes, I remember early on, Dr. Bailey, you told me you could tell when something was going down.
Okay.
At church. Either the person would be either super, super nice to you, where you're like, that's different, or they'd be really, really mean to you. I remember you telling me that, and I was like, oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. And I remember Dr. Bailey was, your husband was still living, and he was listening to our conversation. He was like, what are y'all doing? But I remember that because I remember asking you, I remember you telling me when something is happening, that's one way. That's one way. And so I remember going back to my husband and saying, okay, listen, I don't want to know everything. Yeah. But at least give me a warning. Right. So then I know when that person approaches me, I'm already kind of shielded up, like, okay, I know this is what's going on. And so he still, sometimes he will forget. And I'll be like, now, why didn't you tell me? He's like, oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. I forgot. Oh, yes, this is what is happening. I was like, thank you. Because they roll up on me and ask me about it. And I was like, oh, they did.
Then I'd look at what are my options? You know, what is the real issue? What are my options? I can go left, or Lord, what would you have me to do? I can't overemphasize the need for all of us to grow spiritually and surrender, and fall so in love with Jesus that we're trying to learn His Word more, apply His Word, walk by faith more. Because any of us in the flesh, we might do anything. Right. And we might say anything.
Right. You know what? I had a situation happen had a situation happen, and the person, I remember I have a group. I have a group of college friends that I've known forever, and I remember I called them and I said, "Hey, this is what's happening," and so they're like, "What? Oh my goodness!" They riled up, ready to go. So then I get off the phone. We were like on a group chat. I get off the group text chat with them, and then minutes later I call them back. I text them back and I said, "Y'all, don't worry about it. If this, I just have to trust God in this situation, and the people who know me know me." And it's kind of like what you said earlier. The people who know you will basically say, "No, that's not the person I've seen.
Right.
That's not the person," and I have to go on that. And so, like, y'all know I'm very transparent, but I can't disclose this. But anyway, what I love is something was saying negative about me. A person that I kind of was not close to, but they know me, said something back to the person and was like, "Really don't like how you're handling that. And you really shouldn't do that," or this, that. So people will speak for you.
They will. They will.
Your people will speak for you and pray for you and so on, but you have to trust the process. You have to trust the process, and then you have to trust God. And then, because the old Stephanie, if that would have popped off like 10 years ago, maybe 5 years, no, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have confronted that person. I would have went up to him like, "Now what you say?
Yeah.
Now I'm here right now. What you got?"
Like my mother, and I love my mother so very much. My mother would never start anything. But if you cracked that door, Mama was going to kick the door down.
Like, pow, pow.
I never saw her start anything. But I can recount a whole lot of stories.
Yeah.
And so certain situations, as a pastor's wife, I didn't tell my mother because she would, this is what you ought to do.
Yeah.
And that was before she even moved here.
Yeah.
And so that was the reason why Mom Jackson in Oklahoma City, our temperaments were more alike. And she was my mentor without even saying she's my mentor, just by saying she's Mom. And I could see her example. Not to say my mother was wrong, Mama's personality would have handled it differently.
Yeah, it is when you realize your personality and you know, like, "Oh, no, I can't do that." So I think just even holding your own self accountable and just saying, like, "I need to sit back and I just need to let God handle that," and take account for what you did, but then you don't make it 10 times worse.
Right. And you can have, excuse me.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Then have an accountability partner who can ask you the tough questions.
And say, "Now, how are you going to say it?"
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Did you speak to her today?
Yeah, like, "Did you speak today?" Yeah, having that. All right, Dr. Bailey, so if you could do it all over again, what would you do different? What would you add? What would be your flavor?
If I could do it all over again, I would marry E.K. Bailey.
Oh, I love
that. Makes me feel so good to be able to say that.
That's a good warm hug.
All the many times you don't know through the past 21 years that he's been deceased, to turn over to that side and he's not there. That's another journey. And when you leave the cemetery, you don't know all that you're leaving at the cemetery. And if you don't get that, that means all of that person. But I would do it all over again. I would marry him. I would know how to plan better, to communicate to him more often, because he was the outspoken one and I was the introvert.
Okay.
So when he would say something, many times I would clam up, not thinking that I was thinking, but I wouldn't let him know exactly how I was feeling.
Okay.
So I would be more honest and transparent with him about how I am feeling. My work at the church, I would still love to do that, but I would be more balanced as far as the boundaries again.
Okay.
More free time. If I have any regret about where we lived for 24 years at 1358 Bar Harbor, it would be that I did not take enough time for me at that house. I love the house, but it was a joy to make it happy for him, for the children, for the church, and for everybody else.
But for you.
But for me to get in that pool and enjoy it by myself, to fix me lunch and sit on the patio
And just be still.
and just be still, I would have more me time.
Wow. Wow. And I guess that would be an encouragement to a pastor's wife or just anyone who's listening to this, making sure you take time for you.
But please do that. I've talked to pastors' wives that depending upon the stage of development where the church is, and especially after COVID, so many are working and doing 5 or 6 different things at the church, and they can't find someone to mentor, and they're almost burned out. But it's better to have that conversation with your husband and say, I can't, I'm at this point that if we don't have dinner ready, if the clothes aren't clean, whatever it is, I am tired.
Yeah.
And so that you can have that joy.
Yeah.
And make that place the happy place and have that peace. And when you say it is good for us to come into the house of the Lord, you won't just be saying that.
Right.
You'll be happy that you're there.
And then your kids as well will be happy.
Uh-huh.
You don't want I think that was my biggest fear coming into being a senior pastor's wife. I was worried about how my kids would view the church. I didn't want them to hate the church or hate the position and so on. And starting off and letting them know, like, no, this is something that we do as a family, that we serve, but then protecting their time as well. And so on. Such good lessons.
And I applaud how you do that. And you let the church know we're going to be at this activity supporting our children. And you have done that. And it's all a part of the teaching process. And so we're real people. We serve a great God who's there. And he tells us to cast all of our cares upon him because he cares. And he's the one that can do exceedingly abundantly above all that we can ask, think, or even imagine.
Yes. Well, listen, thank you so much for sharing with
Thank
us.
you. It's my privilege.
You come back anytime,
it's a joy.
anytime to drop in just your wisdom and just your grace and just how you teach with such love. Thank you so much. Thank you for just being a woman of prayer as well. We thank you. We honor you. We honor your husband's legacy. And thank you so much. Liz, how can we keep up with you? How can we keep up with what Dr. Sheila Bailey is doing?
Well, go to SheilaBMinistries.org. That would be the best way. Or you can see me at Concord. Because I love my church. I love my pastor and his family.
Yeah, so we can catch SheilaBMinistries.org. She's on Facebook. You're on Instagram. Sheila B Ministries. They are doing big things, and they're always out in the community helping. We're gonna put that on the screen so you can see that. And listen, y'all, we can't wait to see you and catch you on our next episode of Her Story. I don't